We're going to talk about the essential of life is invisible. We're going to talk about things that are invisible but have high impact for your life via women in technology from Northeast Wisconsin.
At M2 Technology, we're on a mission to make IT accessible to everyone. Join us on our journey to demystify the ever-evolving world of business technology. Are you ready to get unplugged?
Welcome back to IT Unplugged. I'm Brandon.
I'm Aslinn.
And I'm Kelly.
And thanks so much for joining us today. Really excited to talk about women in technology and just both of your journeys in the field of technology. And, maybe to kind of start out, it would be helpful to just kind of explain how you got into technology, what your roles are.
Do you want me to go first?
Sure.
So currently I do installations for like manufacturing types of projects. But I always call it my first love, my first technology love was actually helping rural Montana schools keep their doors open by providing collaboration. That was when, it's not like Zoom now is, but providing and selling collaboration equipment, video equipment to those rural schools so that they could do math, science, and language courses. Because, people that speak foreign languages don't usually live in the Highline of Montana if you've never been there. And so that's kind of how I found my way into the technology world. It's a big world. You can play a lot of parts. Yeah. I played a lot of them, but in general, that's how I got started.
Yeah, excellent.
How about you, Kelly?
I was going to school for marketing, and I ended up taking a programming class in C#. And everybody was struggling, and I was like, oh, I kind of get it. Mm-hmm. Maybe I should dig into this a little bit more. And then I ended up switching my major, and I ended up just really getting it. It was very logical for me. And then I knew that I wanted to kind of spend my career and I've held many different roles in IT, from starting out in support and development to tech leading to management and now directing a team.
Wow, that's great. Yeah. Do you still use it? You still think you can do some C# programming?
No.
I like that was a one-word answer.
Yeah.
I get the concepts, but the syntax is different.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'd love to learn more and kind of have our viewers learn more a little bit about women in technology, right? Because it's a really great organization, and I think, people are interested in it. And so what is women in technology? And then, what are maybe some of the problems that it's addressing?
So Women in Technology it's about 10 years old. It has its birthday coming up. And it was originally formed out of just need for a community to support, retract, sustain, and obtain women in technology or other STEM fields. So I think it really started with technology, but it has kind of branched out and tried to not deter anybody that might not be in a field where there is a high amount of women. And essentially it helps give a sense of community for like-minded people in order to help them understand maybe moments of courage where they're teeter-tottering on taking a step forward in their career. It's there to help educate people. There's 3 pillars that we have that are within because it helps from school age all the way up through your career. I personally have done the WIT at Work pillar, and that is putting together events that help educate or help bring, one thing that we did was tabletop exercises for cybersecurity to help educate people on what is the emotional response if a ransomware attack happens. And so it's real life experiences, and it kind of takes out the lens of any type of specific industry and makes it so that tech professionals in general have that kind of go forward in that community. And
Sure.
Go ahead and talk a little bit about
as I say, I can expand on that. We're a nonprofit. We like to say from classroom to boardroom. So our 3 pillars are WIT at Work, WIT for Girls, and WIT on Campus. So the WIT for Girls, we target kind of middle school age, and we actually do a little hackathon to teach people about programming using a little Adafruit or microbit.
Sure.
WIT on Campus, we provide peer connections and mentoring and things like that. And then Aslinn has been leading our WIT for Girls, WIT at Work pillar, where we do the networking for professionals.
Yeah. I think that's so beneficial, especially when you talk about hey, I took this C# programming class, and that could have been a turning point, right? In your life. And
exactly.
As a previous business teacher myself, I taught business classes, coding within there. Wasn't very good at it, but I read the book.
Yeah.
But with that being said, like there wasn't a lot of females in those classes, even
Absolutely.
when I was teaching 5 years ago, and
Yeah.
we would be like, why? Like,
Right.
and it just didn't feel like there was a lot of awareness around that.
The interesting part is, I firmly believe you can't be what you can't see or what you can't imagine, right? So being role models out there and showing women of all ages in all different careers that it is possible and that you can is really important and something that I really enjoy about the job.
Yeah, it's really neat. So when I'm kind of curious, like, what are some of the other challenges that when it comes to WIT that you guys are kind of trying to solve? You're talking about all those different pillars and stuff like that, but it seems like when you're talking a little bit, Aslinn, like taking that next step in your career and stuff, like almost a little bit of like a push and encouragement and different things like that. And I think maybe I take that for granted a little bit because I'm curious, how do you, like, when is a point that you felt really validated in your career, and how has that like impacted you, and how does women in technology play a role in that?
Yeah, I think I have kind of a meandering path, so mine's a little atypical. One of the things that was a turning point in my career was that I took some time away from my career to take care of an ill parent. And when I was doing that, I think that, when you're kind of facing death, you really have a reprioritization of like what's important. And there was an epiphany where I had always wanted to live in Europe and I wanted to get my education there. Don't ask me why. It was the seed that was put inside of me, and that's what it is. And when I had that time to think about it, I had this idea, well, nobody's going to do it for you. And I put in my application to 2 programs that were in Finland. I had previously lived in Finland. And honestly, I was shocked. I remember, I think it was actually like 13 years ago, 12 years ago, that I opened the email and like I was accepted. And it was a really hard time in life, but I actually went to overseas to do my master's degree, and it just opened up all kinds of doors for me. There was, the entrepreneurial track, there was the AI track, there was, they were really trying to understand how mobile phones were going to disrupt the next generation of business models. And that's what I went to school to learn about. I don't think that we came up with any answers, but we did a lot of like try, iterate, learn, and figuring out how to overcome some of the obstacles. And it was a really great balance of economical and technology, which is something that really lit me on fire. Now that I have that background, I think what I try to do is, there's been like different blockades in my life, and I do try at certain times with women in technology to be very welcoming, because I know what it's like to be on the outside. Obviously, living in another country, you don't speak the language, you can't even read a sign, you don't even know how to get on a bus. And so just knowing what that feels like and bringing that in and trying to create community where there might not have been, that's really the focus for me. So whether it's WIT for girls, WIT on campus, or, WIT at work, just trying to make sure that you see that person that's kind of like looking around and welcoming them in, bringing them in, having a conversation, getting them connected on LinkedIn, and they can reach out to you and say, hey, I lost my job, or hey, I'm looking for this kind of profession. And helping build bridges for people and be that connector. That's kind of what I take forward. Yeah, what about you?
I'm thinking about a time where earlier in my career I was involved in a large project, multi-year, multi-million-dollar project where we were automating some manual processes. And there was an update to the executives, and I was there kind of as tech support, I'll say, right? And then as they started asking more detailed questions, there was a point in the meeting where the conversation turned and they started talking to me, because it was clear that I knew what was going on. That was really validating for me, right? And recognition that, yes, I can do this, I can lead through that. And that really actually helped propel my career forward as well. So, and then I like to, again, think about other women in that kind of position where they need someone that has, can give a friendly advice. They see that they can do this, and be a role model to folks. Really, it sounds kind of corny, but it's true, because you can't be what you can't see.
Yeah.
Right? And so you look at it and go, oh yeah, I could do that, right?
Yeah.
And to be honest, as a woman in technology, I'm the president now for the Northeast region. I want to be able to influence that and bring people together. So one of my big goals is to increase, the amount of people that attend our events, because they're really well thought out events. As Aslinn said, you don't have to be really technical. Technology is in everybody's career, regardless of what you're doing. So we welcome all, including men.
Yeah, and you're moving into the next question so well.
Yeah.
Well, the way you could describe it now, it's like, hey, it's a welcoming environment. You know what I mean? Like, and that's what we're trying to do.
And it really is a community, right? And then, and again, now I've been in the profession for a long time, but I've made new contacts and new networks. Aslinn even just said this morning, you got to fill your cup before you need it. And that networking is so important, right? You never know what could happen, or when a new opportunity arises, or you can just help somebody get to their next level.
Yeah.
Right?
Wonderful.
Making a match.
Yeah. And that's fun to, it's like intrinsically kind of fun and nice to do too. When you're like, oh yeah, you know what, we can connect these people and have some fun at the same time. And,
Absolutely.
You don't
Absolutely.
do it.
And it's a win-win, and you can help someone.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So you were kind of leading into the next question here. And I think, as a man that's like seeing women in technology, and I've seen you on LinkedIn for a while, and I'm just like, oh yeah, that's that thing that I'm not a part, like I can't be a part of, kind of thing. And I was just like, I that's not a club that I can belong to.
Yeah, kind of exclusivity.
Yeah, and then I started talking to you, Aslinn, and you're like, whoa, that's not the case. And I'm just kind of curious, like, let's break that down right now and, throw that out the window. So how do other people get involved? It's not just a single gender thing. It's everyone. And what does that look like for women in technology?
For me, I know that sometimes I see the woman that might have the chip on their shoulder, be passed over for opportunities or not get that promotion and things. And although I understand that and I honor that, that's a part of the human experience, the way that I've really thought about it is that, like, if we do this, like, arm's length where we're going to be separatists, we're not going to go far. It's kind of like the age-old thing, like, if you want to go far, go alone, but if you want to go together, it's going to take some time.
Yeah.
And if we look at the demographics of the current STEM field makeup, men aren't going anywhere, and women are trying to get into more of those positions. And so I see it as a great partnership and an allyship where, when I speak to men about it, we don't have one without the other as a part of the human experience. So you must have a wife, maybe a daughter, maybe a mom, or somebody in your life that has a career. And they are going to need to be elevated in some capacity. They're going to be needed to have that person say their name in rooms that they are not in. So I see it as a great partnership. And also I see it as, like, we need to learn from each other. Sometimes you show up and you're not aware of how you show up, and you need that person to come and say, hey, I'm not sure if you realize that you showed up this way. And it's those aha moments that really turn you on. And instead of, like, kind of going into this dead end that you might keep going into, they're the person that kind of is like, hey, 10 degrees to the right.
Yeah.
Look up. And it can be the differentiator between success and failure in a person's career. So.
Yeah, to expand on that, there are disparities, right? That's just a fact. So we do want to cater to women, but I also don't want to just preach to the choir. There's some self-education and understanding how you show up, but there's also things that men can do, and we want that allyship. I believe that a lot of men don't even realize certain things about how we're different, right?
Sure.
And so just kind of education is a big part of that. For example, when there's statistics out there that when a man looks at a job description, they can go, oh, I got one or two of those, I'm applying.
Yeah.
Right? And they're very confident to do that. It's been proven that women have to have like 50% or more of those qualifications before they'll even consider applying.
Yeah.
And then just like understanding some of those idiosyncrasies so that we can all work together to be better.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. I guess getting into even more practical, like how do I don't want to say we, like as in just men, but like how what does an advocate really look like, and how maybe you're starting at like everybody, if we just took one step, I mean, like into it, because you can't just you can't just turn around and be like, okay, now I'm the super advocate, right?
Right.
We got to learn and we got to, move
Yes.
through that. But what does that kind of look like?
Yeah, one step, in my opinion, is just to be an ally and being aware. So if you can educate yourself on some of those differences and then provide those opportunities to the women that you know, right? Making that connection, showing up and giving advice. Just a simple little thing as giving advice or saying, hey, I recognize that you did a great job there. Things like that, I think, go a long way and really make a difference. Something small or something as big as presenting at one of our events or, showing up with your open positions or, giving some honest feedback about how you see people, for example, in an interview situation or something like that.
Yeah.
I've always given the feedback that oftentimes the words that they say really are impactful. And so when people say things that minimize themselves or that they over apologize, those are kind of two ways that sometimes women will show up that I'm like, it's okay. You don't have to apologize. Take up space. It's okay. And
you deserve a seat at the table.
Yes. And not only that is something else that I try to do, is when we're in a big group, and maybe I'm not an only, but maybe there's only a couple, I will actually draw out that person and say, hey, I haven't heard much from you. I'd really like to understand your position on this. And if you exemplify that and you show that, I have seen tenfold where others will perpetuate that type of activity. And they're like, oh, yeah.
Little stuff like that can make a huge difference.
Yeah. Yeah. I could see how, just even like self-reflection on anybody doing that to someone else is like, oh, wow, that was a really great thing. So being intentional about it.
Being intentional. And again, it doesn't have to be women. It can be anyone, the shy person in the room. But then when you realize the differences in how people show up, then you can kind of be better educated on how to erase some of those sticomas.
Yeah. Well, this is great. I feel like I just learned some actual things that you can do. You know what I mean? Like walking out of the room, which is fun.
We're going to have you come to the next event and present. That would be nice.
Yeah.
You name the dates and we'll be there. Even though this is a layer later. But yeah. You name the date, we'll be there. No, that's interesting. So, I mean, it's great practical advice. One of the other things that we kind of talked about in pre-conversations and stuff like that is mentorship. And just what's a time in your guys' life where you had a mentor that really made a difference, and then how have you paid that forward as well?
You want to go?
I've had formal mentors and informal mentors, and I've gotten value from both, and I've also not gotten value from both. On a mentor that I had that didn't work well, we didn't connect. We were of course professional and I learned something, but we didn't really have that connection. So to me, I think that's really important, is to have a connection. If you have a formal program, raise your hand at your company and say, yes, I want to be in it. Right? But there's a lot of informal mentorship on a day-to-day basis, and just being an ally, speaking up when they're not there, encouraging them to speak. Personally, advice I'd gotten from a mentor that has always stuck with me, one of my first mentors, is women will judge themselves by intent, but judge others by action. And just by stepping back and thinking about intent of that individual and supporting them is being an ally.
Yeah. Wow. Sounds like you had a couple good ones.
I did.
Yeah. So what do you think has more value for you in the past? Has it been formal or informal? Because you said you've had both. So, and you also mentioned the relationship aspect.
Yeah, it depends.
Of it, so.
The networking is a big part of it. I can give a quick story of a person that I've worked with for a long time, admire her a lot. She'd been in one team in one area for a long time. And she approached me like, hey, I want to be promoted. What do you think? And the fact that she did that was extremely courageous, even though we were friends, but she was, in an informal way asking me to mentor her. So I met with her several times over a few-month period, and I was just totally honest. This is how people see you. This is what I think you should do differently, right? Get on a new team, speak up. I'll sign you up for a special project so you get more visibility to other people. I was guilty of this early in my career too. You thought that if you worked hard, people would just notice and you would be promoted.
Sure.
Men don't think that way. right? And so advocating for yourself, advocating for others. So I shared with her a lot of the things that I learned through WIT programs and the books that I've read, and I advocated for her, and she ended up getting a promotion. And now she's doing fabulous, and we still talk on occasion.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Nice.
that was very satisfying.
I'm kind of curious, and you were talking about like those honest conversations and stuff like that. Are those relationships as well? I'm trying to figure out the advocacy thing, which is awesome, right? And like men having those honest conversations with how women are perceived in those rooms and stuff like that. Like, is that something that it feels like maybe a little bit of a barrier to kind of overcome sometimes, because you don't want to be. There's those things out there right now, like, hey, I don't want to, mansplain this, and like, hey, like, there's that word, right? And you're like, I don't want to tell you how you're being perceived right now. So, like, how does somebody who obviously has that care and concern, like, approach something like that? Do you have to be asked, or is that something that you can kind of move forward with and say, like, hey, here's what I'm observing right now, if it's for the betterment of someone?
I think it is a delicate situation at times, right? And it might depend on that situation, right? And depending on, I don't want to go down a hierarchy path, but there is some of that involved there, right?
Yeah.
If there's someone that's 2 layers above you, you're not just going to walk up to them and say, hey, how'd you think I spoke? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You don't want to do that, right?
Yeah.
But you might ask another person that was in the room or afterwards, right? One of the things that I've done since we've had the pandemic, right, everybody's virtual. So meetings are recorded oftentimes, right? You can go back and watch yourself, right?
Oh, wow.
Or you can ask a friend, right? And I've done that. I've asked men, how did you feel about my response?
Yeah.
And gotten very good feedback.
Yeah.
So, but you have to kind of read the situation and read the individual.
Sure, absolutely. So, after this podcast, have a couple people, hearing this and being like, okay, I'm going in there, I'm going to tell you exactly how everything, like, that's the last thing.
Of course, you still have to be professional.
Yeah.
You still have to consider feelings and all of that, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Okay.
But being open and honest, people want that. People want to hear, hey, maybe you should change this. Think about that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it takes delivering any kind of feedback can be tough for individuals. So to then do it is always valuable, where it might come through, and even if someone gives me feedback and it's sometimes a little critical, I'm like, oh, that hurt, but thanks so much. Like, I wish somebody would have told me that earlier, because it's been...
You were walking around without it. Like, you were walking around thinking something.
Yeah.
And then you're like, oh, I was not showing up how I wanted to.
Yeah, 100%. Both of you have kind of mentioned, speaking up for someone that's maybe not in the room. What does that exactly mean, and what does that look like? Because I think we're touching on a lot of different things, but I don't know if we fully, I fully understand what that looks like if someone's not there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right. If I'm in a leadership position and we're talking about, standing up a new team or special project, I will, the names will be thrown on the table, and well, make sure that we have some diversity in this group.
Gotcha.
Right? Did you think about that team? Did you think about that individual?
Yeah.
Right. That's exactly what we mean. Is speaking up for Aslinn when I know, for example, she's looking for X, and I might put her name in the hat for something special. Okay.
And likewise, if you're approached for an opportunity that might be kind of like a stretch assignment or something, and personally that you can't take on anything, all the pots on the stove are boiling over.
Yeah.
Saying, hey, I unfortunately have to say no to this, but I really think that, such and such is really interested in this field, and they have shared that with me, and I think that if you want me to broker an introduction or something, let me know. And I think that sometimes the little extras go a long way, instead of just throwing out their name, saying, hey, would you like me to broker an introduction, or would you like me to help with that? Is the extra thing that can really make it happen.
Yeah. That I feel like you guys are dropping these nuggets that are really great, that aren't sometimes we talk and it's big picture, and these are things that you can turn around and start doing tomorrow.
Yeah,
so,
and once you're conscious, it's really not that hard.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, conscious about it. Yeah.
One of the kind of last things that I want to touch on is as you've had these careers, what do you think has been some of the biggest changes for women in the field? And then what are some of the things that still need a lot of work? Just a really easy softball question to end.
Throughout my career, I while I was working full time, I also had 2 children. Thinking about leaving or, for maternity leave and things like that, I think is something that still needs work in some areas.
Yeah.
Right? How do we really enable women to do that and come back in full force, I think is important. And then accommodate that in the workforce as well.
Yeah.
When someone has. So I believe post-pandemic that everybody has gotten a whole lot better at hybrid or remote work. So I think that brought down some of those barriers, right, where we're able to work part-time, work remote, and be able to also raise a family. Every woman I know is doing both, right, as is men, right? They're doing the same thing. So I think that helped level the playing field a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that this is kind of a hard question because I don't know if I have like one thing.
Yeah.
It's very much some submissive things that I see happen, and one of those is you might hear somebody that is more soft-spoken express an opinion, and in the conversation they just kind of get ran over, and you can kind of like see them go small.
Yeah.
And that's that, body language and whatnot. And then the other thing that happens so easily, and I've seen it happen too many times, is that snowball effect happens where maybe a woman has an idea and then, it might not have the same vernacular that somebody else puts it out there, and it's easy for somebody else to claim that credit for that. And it's not so much about claiming the credit for the idea or the solution. It's more that like maybe they're the ones that get to go off and do the team, and it's like, ooh, wait a second, that was my idea. And just making sure that you're not snowballing, like this person was assertive and giving other titles to that don't belong, because it shows up in a way that's not necessarily agreeance of what that person is supposed to be. Essentially not letting a person's value be externally valued. It needs to be something that if somebody stood up in that meeting and you didn't like it, not necessarily trying to fight with that, but trying to understand, like, what am I against here? Am I against the person? Am I against the idea? And trying to decouple those things, because I think that if we objectively look at those, you might have a different outcome.
Well,
Yeah.
that's great. Last thing here, okay? When it comes to, women that are looking to maybe break into the tech field, or maybe there's middle school, high school students going, hey, I think I want to get into, some field in tech. What would your advice be to them?
Know thyself. Yeah. And be curious. I think that those 2 core principles pretty much can lead you any path in your life. And never disconnect with yourself, because you really have to know yourself to be able to say, like, do I like programming? Because maybe they were in marketing and they didn't realize that marketing is super tech, really it is. And I think that will set them up for success, whatever path that they go down.
Great answer.
Yeah.
Any gender, be curious.
Yeah.
I love that. And advocate for yourself, but also take it into your own hands where possible. Right, I hear stories of people who are without a job for a little while, and they took 3 courses during that time to better their skills so that they're prepared for the next one. That's awesome. And when you're in the job, there's all sorts of self-learning opportunities and things like that to stay fresh, especially in IT. You have to stay fresh, and a lot of times that is on you to do.
Yeah. I think that curious, I want to touch all the buttons. I want to do all the things. And so I do. Somebody says a new AI tool, and I go out and look at it. Like, oh, what's this all about?
Yeah.
And it makes for good conversation, but it also makes for good experience.
Yeah.
As you move up the chain, then I also think about, capitalizing on all the people around you and really advocating for your team and making sure that your team is enabled, right? And capitalizing on the strengths of every individual.
Sure. Yeah. That's great. I love the go break things kind of thing. We have an IT consultant, and I went to high school with him, and he broke everything at the school on purpose. Like, but he's a great IT consultant. You know what I mean? But that was the thing, is curious, and hey, how do How do we
Was
break
it trying to
this?
fix it? Was
No,
it in the
of
effort?
course
It was
not.
just to break
It
it.
was it was to do bad things, probably.
Oh, okay.
Not
All right,
like
well,
bad.
there's
You know
that
what
in
I
the
mean?
world.
Like,
I
yeah,
get it.
yeah, you know, like
Yeah.
how this will be pretty funny. So yeah, but you always find like those people that are curious and willing to tinker and
Yes.
play with things usually
Right.
end up being somebody that
Right.
is a high achiever later on because that curiosity just continues. And
Right,
continues
and like
continues.
Aslinn said, know thyself. If you're an introvert who likes to read a lot,
Mhm.
maybe that's a good spot, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you both so much for
Yeah.
being here, and I'm very excited for Women in Technology, what you are doing, and I'm excited to see what the next step people can take, when it comes to being an advocate. And I'm also excited to present it, whatever that is that you throw at me.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much for listening to this episode of IT Unplugged. Make sure you check out Women in Technology on LinkedIn, Facebook, their website, all that fun stuff. And we'll see you next time.